My name is Anthony Monteith, and I have an extra special guest. I feel very blessed to have met him. This is Master Yap. Master Yap Boh Heong is a teacher, instructor. He travels the world teaching many different styles of Kung Fu, and more recently has been traveling Europe sharing Yan Shou Gong. So Master Yap, thank you very much for joining me today. Could you
welcome. Yeah.
Could you give me a little brief introduction about yourself and where you are now and what you've been doing, please?
Yeah. Okay. I started out with the martial arts at the age of 11. I guess I was very fortunate because I was, you can say, literally born into it. My father is a Grandmaster, and he had a great master as well, Grandmaster QiGong. My father's name is Grandmaster Yap Cheng Hai. And since I was young, I was always watching them practicing Kung Fu in the backyard of our house, you see. I would be sitting on a doorstep, and then until I was about 11, then my dad says, okay, you're old enough to join the class. And that's how I started. And I've been training more or less continuously for, well, since 11 until now. There was a period where I wasn't training seriously, meaning that I did not attend class or did not train with a regular group. But I did continue my own, personal training, solo training. And that was during a period where, the usual things that interrupt your Kung Fu, career and family. But since then, I've picked it up again in the early 2000s, seriously. And that's when, I felt I really made big steps in my own development. Of course, all those years sort of laid the foundation to it. But the clarity and the, you can say, realization came in the 2000s, you see.
Yeah.
And yeah, part of it, you can say a big motivation for that was because my dad literally told me, if you want to improve and go to the next level of your own learning, you have to start teaching. Before that, I was not interested in teaching because I felt it would take away my own learning time, But so he literally forced me to help teach Yan Shou Gong class. And that's when I started teaching, I realized how much, more I have to learn or can learn once I start teaching, you see, because it forces you, number one, to be clearer in your own knowledge because you have to explain things to people. It also, when you teach, students will present you with questions that you can't answer on the spot, and that makes you do a bit more research and searching to find the right answers and so on. The other big thing that motivated me in teaching was it took me about 40 years to get to where I was then. And so when I started teaching, I asked myself the question, is it going to take my students 40 years to get to where I am? And I found that answer was not acceptable because it's too long, I think. And I think the other part of it is there's a issue facing the traditional arts, It takes too long to learn. And because of that, many people in the younger generation nowadays do not want to take up the traditional arts because they say, oh, that's my grandfather's art. It's going to take me 20 years to master. I don't have the time or the patience. I'd rather do something else. Hence this, huge interest in things like Muay Thai, MMA, because they felt, I can start learning it, in 3 months' time, I can enter the ring and, at least do a bit of sparring and so on. Whereas with traditional Kung Fu, you don't learn to fight until you're probably 3 or 4 years down the road. So what I felt was, unless the method of teaching changed, a lot of younger people, the new generation, would not take up the traditional arts And if that happens, then the traditional arts would die off, you see. And we are beginning already to see this sort of a phenomenon happen, especially in Asia. You see. A lot of the younger people in Asia are not really interested in traditional arts. They rather take up, Muay Thai, MMA, or even things like karate and taekwondo, because they are more sport orientated.
Yes.
So I think that was the motivation.
It's excellent. I think you're unique, I think, in that regard. I mean, I know there are other people trying to preserve it, but I think it's a very clever, from what I've seen so far, it's been put together very clever in that it's very accessible. And I mean, I experienced the weekend with you in the Netherlands, and all the instructors are very high quality. There's not anyone that isn't, everyone has their unique approach to it and a unique understanding, which I think is what really just blew me away. So I have been, as I've said to you before, in the wilderness pretty much I'm 50, and I've been involved in martial arts since I was about 10, on and off. And later on, I just wanted to learn QiGong and Neigong and couldn't really grasp concepts, and so one of the questions I know was important to both me and yourself is, with the thousands of styles of Qigong and various concepts relating to Neigong, how do we determine as a practitioner or as a student which is a good internal art to follow? Yeah.
Okay. That's tough question to answer, but there are some simple in a sense answers to it. I think if anyone who's well read or has done their time, okay, so to speak, traveling on this path of the internal arts, would have come across, key concepts, right? And terminology like how to be song, the concept of qi, and so on, you see. And to a large extent, this is common throughout at least the internal Chinese martial arts, right? The concept of qi also exists in the Japanese arts. They call it ki. And in the Indian arts, they call it prana, right? So it is not something so unique. It is quite generic in that sense. And the concepts are more or less the same, it's a form of energy that's essential for life itself. And you can mobilize or train to mobilize and use that energy for the purpose of health and also for the purpose of martial arts. So to step backwards a bit, there's this concept I use when I talk about learning, something for myself. And it's based on the three questions: what, why, and how, really. What is the thing you're trying to learn, right? Why do you want to learn it? And how do you go about learning it, really? And I think to a large extent, the question of what Qigong or internal arts are more or less quite well defined. There are a lot of books written on it and so on. And why you want to do it, of course, for health reasons, for martial arts reasons, that's also fairly well known. But unfortunately, what is not explained well is the how part, right? After knowing what and why, how do you achieve it? You see, I think that's the part that is missing. And that, I think, has to do with the ways, I would say, the Eastern philosophy and way of learning goes, you see. In the East, be it, in any art, be it calligraphy or feng shui or martial arts or internal Qigong, right? We're not so concerned about why it works, analyzing the mechanisms of it, going down to the minute detail and so on, you see. Rather than what in the Eastern way of doing it is practice, do it, practice 1,000 times, 10,000 times until you get it. Now, in the old days, when you live in a monastery and you don't have things like career and so on to get in the way,
Yeah, yeah.
This works. Yeah. You have years and lots of time to practice. I mean, if you stay in a monastery, you're practicing 8 hours a day.
Yes.
Compared to, modern day now, you'll be lucky if you can practice twice a week, 1.5 hours each. That means you have only 3 hours in a week versus the guy who's doing it 8 hours a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with that sort of practice, you will eventually get to learn something, right? Because you're sort of reprogramming your body, your mind, your neuromuscular system, and so on. And with the correct guidance, of course, you will get the results. But it takes a long time. And, the success rate, let's put it this way, is quite low. See?
Yeah.
And if you look in the internal martial arts world, even nowadays, you see some great masters, but you don't see many great students, right? Because, you're lucky if you get 1 in 10,
Yes.
the people who are talented enough, who've got maybe the time or the dedication to work that way to get it, you see. And also in Eastern philosophy case, we don't care how it works in that sense, so long as it works, you see. So that's why
Yes.
in Kung Fu, you follow this method of doing it. If it works, it's okay. You don't need to worry about how it works.
That's very true. When I trained in acupuncture, many of my teachers had asked them, what is qi, or how does this work? And they were like, who cares? It works.
Yeah, that's right. So I think,
interesting.
yeah, that is the sort of trend, philosophical trend in the East, you see. Okay. Whereas I think in the Western world, a lot of the ways of learning and also knowledge of how to treat knowledge came from the Greeks, right? I wouldn't say the Greeks were the only influence, but they were the major influence. And the Greeks were very analytical, right? You want to analyze the phenomena, find out how it works, what it is, the mechanisms of it, and so on, you see. And that later on derived into the scientific method, as we know it nowadays, the ability to have empirical methods, right, to prove that something works. And once you have those methods defined or theorems defined, then you can have repeatability and scalability, right? So I think those are the advantages of the scientific method, which were not there in the Eastern methods, you see. So that's why you don't have many people who are highly skilled in, internal martial arts. So I think the two differences in philosophy resulted in this sort of a, thing, that the way the martial arts are now, and how it's taught. And I think I'm fortunate, maybe you can say, that I was steeped in both, both ways. Okay, I was born into a very traditional Eastern environment, as my father was was a classical scholar, right, in Chinese. And then he was also a Kung Fu as well as QiGong master. He also knew about Feng Shui, right? It was, in fact, one of the, you can say, people who brought Feng Shui to the Western world. One of the earlier people who did that, because he had many students, Western students. And he was also very well knowledgeable and in the practice of the spiritual arts, in terms of both Buddhism and Taoism. So I grew up in that sort of environment. And fortunately, I was sent to a traditional in the sense that it's a Western education, right? Mm. So, and I went, through I had that opportunity. And at a young age, I was very interested in science, and so on, because, that was during the 60s, right? The Apollo missions and so on. That motivated me to be interested in science. So I developed also the knowledge about what you would term as the Western scientific methods, you see. And
very good. I have to say, what I loved is your teaching is you have your foot in both camps. So you can relate to people very, very easily.
Yeah. So that's why when I started teaching, I wanted to figure out, okay, what can I do to speed up that teaching and learning process? Because like I said, 40 years for a guy to reach this level of skill is a bit too long. So my intention was to shorten it by at least a factor of 3. You know, so what you can achieve in 10 years should be achievable in 3 years. And I believe over the years, I spent about 8 to 10 years in the process of research before I actually started to seriously teach. And I think from the students that I've got, I think I've been able to achieve that, the factor of 3 to 1. And I'm now aiming for 5 to 1, you know, so meaning that what takes 10 years should be achievable in 2 years. So it's still a work in progress, you know, but every time I teach, we are tweaking that pedagogy, you know, that methodology a bit, making it better, making it easier for the students to learn. Yeah,
it's truly excellent. I mean, you see it in Lyndon. You can see how much he's achieved in the time that he's known you. It's quite phenomenal. And obviously Gary, and of course Jimmy, who's basically following you all around the world together. And like the level of skill is, I mean, I struggle to find that level of skill anywhere. And also what I do enjoy is the fact that everyone, there's a sharing, there's an open sharing, there's no egos. It's pretty much, you know, I mean, you saw at the seminar that you taught me as Bernie from the north, like literally about 10 feet across the floor. And that was only the first day. And I know that's not the necessary outcome, but it's a good way of demonstrating how people can mobilize internal structure. Very good. The next question I have for you, which is what health benefits have you seen personally with your students and other people derived from practicing your arts, particularly?
Before I answer that, there's a couple of things I left out in the previous question. How to determine what would be a good system is. I think one is, of course, the being exposed to it. You know, try it out for yourself and see whether it produces the results that you want. I think secondly, also what is important is the lineage and the history behind the art, you see. A lot of sort of QiGong or martial arts will claim they come from Wu-Tang, they come from Shaolin, but there should be a proper lineage. Who are the teachers? What are their reputation? What have they achieved, you know? So there's one way to look at it, right? I've come across QiGong that has been created, so-called created in the modern sense, you see. And there's no trace of lineage of any sort, you know, and there's no mention of who's the master and so on. So I think to find a good QiGong, one has to go back to that lineage, you see. And again, so that I think is important. Secondly is to look at the results of the, like you say, the teaching, you see. How many students, you know, skilled students has that lineage or has that school been able to produce, you know, what their qualities are like. And I think like what you pointed out just now also, I think part of those qualities are not just in the skills, the physical skills or the energetic skills, but also I believe very much in the qualities as a person, you see, the humility, you know, compassion. All these are also qualities that are taught by authentic lineage, you see. Shaolin teaches that, Wu-Tang teaches that, you see. So qualities of compassion, you know, humility, and things like that, you know.
I know we
character of the person.
I know we had this discussion in the past, and I did see it in my career of teachers who felt the need for some unknown reason to punish students, you know, thinking instead of nurturing them, you know. And I mean, I don't know very much Chinese, but I do know the concept of sifu is more than just a teacher. It's like an uncle or a family
a father,
father to the student. And I mean, not necessarily a father, but the fatherly qualities of nurturing, guiding, allowing students to make mistakes and then learning from the mistakes rather than punishing them, you know. And I definitely get that sense from your teaching style, and I presume that's passed on from your own father, etc. I think that's crucial to nurturing And it actually, some of the most incredible people I've met are usually the most gentle and the most compassionate. They tend to actually be the toughest people as well.
Yeah.
I know I came from a background of fear, wanting to fight, to protect myself, shouting a lot and being very external. So I'm enjoying going internal now because it's such a peaceful place to be.
Yeah.
So going back to my question on health benefits so far, I know a lot of your students use this. I mean, I've been trying to understand it from a Chinese not even a Chinese medicine, but from a Tuina and from a bodywork perspective. But I know there are people that have been using your systems to basically benefit their overall health. For me, I've noticed more calm. I'm more calm doing the system. I'm not as easily bent out of shape emotionally.
Yeah, I think there are many benefits of doing our system, and I would say it's not only our system, but any authentic QiGong or Neigong system would be able to do that. You see, and as you pointed out, one of the most fundamental benefits is the ability to achieve a calmness of mind. You know, a sensation of peace and calmness. You see, basically, and this also relates back to mental health, right? I think if you look at it, if I'm not wrong, WHO did a study on mental health, and they're saying that almost 1 in 3 adults in Western countries have minor issues with mental health. And the 3 big issues are stress, anxiety, and depression. And the numbers are high, but they are not normally accepted or acknowledged because a lot of people self-medicate. And well, that could range from anything from off-the-shelf drugs to alcohol. And now here, for example, in Amsterdam, you have access to cannabis, right? So so these are the ways people take to sort of calm themselves down. But we are saying that with the traditional Neigong arts, there is an alternative that is, beneficial. It doesn't need to depend on other chemical substances and so on. You see, so I think that is one of the best benefits I feel of the Qigong, the ability to calm your mind, right, and to reduce that stress, anxiety, and even depression. Really.
Yes,
and as been scientifically shown, your mental state can actually affect your physical state, right? So stress, for example, produces cortisol and other hormones that leads to other ailments, right? They'll give you, high blood pressure and so on, So mental states does affect your hormonal states, which in turn affects your physical state. So if you can reduce the amount of stress, for example, or anxiety, then that would effectively also help you in your physical well-being, right? So that's one part of it. And having said that, I think one of the important things about proper Qigong is what we term using the outside to move the inside. And one way to describe this would be like the traditional way to describe it would be to clear blockages and so on. But I think a better analogy would be like, if you buy an old house and you want to move into it, one of the first things you got to do is make sure that the plumbing is working. So you got to fix the plumbing and fix the wiring. Because if the wiring and the plumbing are not fixed, then electricity and water cannot flow. See? So if you equate qi as electricity and, jing as, say, water, then if your pipes are broken, then the energy will not flow. So I think most of us, when we are born, our body should be in good working condition, right? Or perfect working condition, put it that way. But because of lifestyle and habits and so on, a lot of the pipes get broken. So I believe, what Qigong does, the first thing is to help you repair those pipes, you see. And that's where the movements come in. You see, having the proper movements will help you to realign your body structures, your connection between the fascia, and your organs and so on, you see.
Yes.
And once those connections are fixed, then it that's why, it clears the blockages. And then when you start the breathing processes, that will generate the qi, then the qi can move. But without those pipes being fixed, then things are not going to happen. So I think that's why the correct movements and postures are important. And it's not just a matter of, waving your hands around in a random manner.
Yeah. I think I love that video you did a while back on the roadmap. And I think that kind of reiterates what you've just said. There's no point practicing, as you say, blindly waving your hands around in the air. I mean, it might make you feel nice and it has its own place.
Yeah.
But the connection between the different parts of that roadmap are not they're not unified. It becomes just a very random movement practice, which has its own health benefits, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
I have a recent friend called Robbie. You might be watching this. He's a movement specialist, and when you watch him move, he moves always with intention. It's incredibly beautiful to watch, and it feels different, and it evokes an emotion within you that you wouldn't get from someone just randomly flapping their hands around. So I think that's
right. Yes,
the thing that I found with these internal arts. That intention is part of it, and it's not necessarily imagining things. It's the intention of feeling that process of turning the qua or opening the qua or extending the fingers to feel the tendons. All of that is part of that intention. And it's transformative in the brain at some neurological level. I can feel the next day that that something has been reprogrammed in a pleasant way. And as you say, consistency is the key to this art. Not everyone has 3 hours a day. I learned to style in China, where the guy who taught me, he said to his master, he said, "Master, this form takes 2 hours to do, just the one form, 108 movements." And okay, go back to Hangzhou and teach it. And he says, nobody in Hangzhou will ever want to do this because they're so busy trying to make money. So he managed himself somehow to distill it to 4 essential movements. And he got it down to half an hour. And of course, most people back in the 90s had half an hour to give. But what I'm enjoying is the forms, the way you deliver the forms. And one of the questions I had for you was on, is it possible to learn this system online? Because a lot of people in the past would have poo-pooed that and said, you need to be face-to-face all the time with your teacher.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's right. If you have asked me maybe as little as 3-4 years ago, I would have said no, And I think the COVID changed a lot of things. Due to the COVID, of course, I couldn't teach, right? Travel and teach. So I was trying to figure out a way of how to teach, you see. And of course, several of my students also approached me and say, since we can't see you or I can't see them, can we try and do something online? So that's how it started, you see. And so since then, we've been, of course, had the online course of which you were a participant, an early participant, right? On the MartialMan.
Yes.
And I think, from that, we learned quite a bit. And this goes back to that model, what I call, and I think this developed during the COVID because it forced I sort of forced myself to look at my past teaching experience and learning experience and try to isolate what are the factors and process, you can say, a pedagogy for learning the internal arts. And I summed it up in this, what I call a model, the 5 stages of learning internals. The first and the last stage, if I quickly repeat it because it's in one of the other MartialMan videos, is using the outside to move the inside. And the last stage is using the inside to move the outside. And most QiGong masters will be familiar with these 2 terms, you see. But what is missing is the 3 things in between. So once you have the correct movements and that starts activating, and aligning your internal structures, the next thing you got to do is to be aware of it, to be mindful, as they say nowadays, to be mindful of what is happening inside. That means that you have to turn your feelings, your sensations into your body and think, or rather feel what is going on as you move. Now, once you are aware of your internal structures, comes the third part, which is learning how to control those internal structures, right? How to connect your arms, for example, without a big movement, but using a smaller movement, right? So this is one example of control. And also it could include things like tensing or relaxing certain parts of the body, which normally you would think is working together. For example, one of the things we do is learn how to loosen each joint and let each joint work independently. So those are examples of control. So once you have that control, then you begin to learn how to generate and, importantly, how to channel energy. That means you learn how to direct energy, how to get it to move from one place to another. And once you can do that, then you can use the inside to move the outside. So what I realized from the online part is we can fulfill the first part, meaning learn the correct movements so that by doing the correct movements, the student can feel what is happening inside. Okay. And that I think is achievable online, right? Either you use pre-recorded classes or you can do it through like a Zoom session. But to develop the awareness, that is also possible provided that the student himself has already got, number one, certain experiences, has already, say, done a lot of internal arts, so that when you tell the person to, okay, can you song your kwa? He knows what it means. But if it's a beginner, you would have no idea what that means, you see. So if that person has already got a certain amount of experience, you can sort of verbally and visually guide the person online. I've done it with one of my instructors, right? And the other important condition for meeting point 2 is that they have already experienced parts of the things, you see, that we show them. So a good example was that to be able to touch hands with one of us, not just me, but one of our students, so that they can feel what it means to be song, what it means to be, to have thing in the hands and so on, you see, to be able to feel the strings. So although they may not, because through touching our hands and our contact of our bodies, they are able to feel what it is like, you see, although they may not be able to do it themselves, right? But at least they have an idea, this is what it means by be song, this is what it means to open your kwa. So they have that knowledge. And later when they go back and train, that provides a goal for them to aim towards when they do their training, you see. So we call this setting landmarks, in the roadmap. So once you have a landmark, then you know what to aim for. So if they have got the landmarks, let's say they attended a seminar, then you can probably guide the student in more detail how to achieve that and get their own experience. So stage 2 is, I would say, conditionally possible. That means, learning to feel the internals. But of course, going to a seminar and have somebody personally guide you with touch and with feeling, right? That will definitely make it a lot more faster. But stage 3, learning how to control and learning how to direct, I believe that would need physical touch, you see, because as you know, right, a lot of internal things is done through touch and feeling, you see? And that is something that is quite impossible to explain verbally or even visually. Yeah. So I believe at least the first stage is possible to do online, to learn the correct movements. But of course, the videos have to be crafted in such a way that, it actually explains what is correct and what is incorrect. The second part is possible to a certain degree based on the experience of the person and also the landmarks they have, seen, put it that way. but third and fourth and fifth will need physical attention.
Very good. So one of the questions I had was around your earliest memories of learning Yan Shou Gong from your father and your father's teacher. What was that like in comparison to doing Kung Fu and having to do all the hard stuff and stances and training and conditioning?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I was not interested in Yan Shou Gong early on. And in fact, my father began to sort of, persuade me to learn or take up Yan Shou Gong. And I actually resisted him for quite a number of years until he literally forced me to do it. Because I was more interested in the five ancestors at that time, right? First, and also WuMei. And because as a younger person, you're more interested in the physical stuff. You like the so-called fighting capabilities, right? Of the martial arts. And also, I wasn't so much interested in the healing, let's say, part of it, until he literally dragged me to teach in one of his seminars. He said, "Come on, you're following me this weekend. We're going to Singapore, I think I remember correctly, and you're going to help me teach a seminar." And that's how it started. So I had to, of course, I had about a week's notice. So I diligently went through all the forms and all that, and I started teaching. And that was the surprising thing to me, because he's already told me before, right? You want to learn more, you have to teach. And I actually experienced that during that seminar. I said, when I started teaching, that's when I discovered certain things became a lot clearer to me.
Yes.
And I think the other part of the realization is that, wait a minute, this is not just for Yan Shou Gong. The principles and the results, of the QiGong that I was teaching Yan Shou Gong can be applied back to the other arts that I had, you see.
Yeah.
And of course, yes, it made a lot of sense, because this was the fundamental Neigong that came out of Shaolin. And obviously it has the roots for all the other system as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And to explain to the audience, you have WuMei, you're a holder in WuMei, and you also have Five Ancestors Fist, which is, there's not many people left that practice and teach that anymore.
Yeah.
And that's,
Five Ancestors, there's still a fair number, but WuMei, there's less than a handful.
That's what I meant. I got them mixed up there. The WuMei is not as well known.
Yeah.
Very good. And then, so moving forward in terms of, I know just from my own personal experience for healers, for therapists, for even psychotherapists, right? For even people who use their voice, there's a lot to be derived by having self-cultivation. And I know on my channel, this podcast is all about self-cultivation, what people do.
Yes.
Some of my friends kayak in Boulder, Colorado, and other people, one or two of my friends like to do the deep sea swimming, but this for me is my cultivation, and I do see a benefit for me. But I know that you've shown me some techniques that come from your systems to help healing. But how could a healer or a therapist or a body worker benefit from consistent practice such as this? This type of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. And also it comes from my own learning experience, Like I said, I was not much interested in the healing aspect of it. But when I developed and taught more and felt that, and saw that this could really help people, and that gave me a deep sense of satisfaction, you see. And that's when I began to take a more serious interest in this area. Now, I would describe it in two parts. One is the mental aspects of the healing, and two is the physical or the energetic part of the healing, really. Now, the mental part was again another surprising find that I discovered as I, delved more deeper into the teaching. And part of this was because I had a very good friend. I have a very good friend who was a psychotherapist. She has been one for 20 years. And we haven't seen each other for quite a number of years. And of course, when you meet up, you talk about what you've been doing, that sort of thing. I said I've been teaching, martial arts and QiGong. And one of the interesting things that was related to me by one of the students, and he's a physical therapist, and he mentioned that when you do the deep massage, he also did the anatomy trains, the facial massage. Quite a number of his patients have an emotional release. So they would, sometimes be in a state of happiness or sadness. Some of them would weep, And so this was related to me. So I asked my friend, and she said, yeah, that's true, because stress, a lot of mental trauma and stress has been shown to be stored in the fascia itself. And she pointed me out to a well-known researcher in this area, a Dutch man by the name of Bessel van der Kolk, spelled Kolk, who works in the US. And he actually wrote a book that is called The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, wow.
And in there, and he specialized in treating trauma, mental trauma, and he worked a lot with people with PTSD, and trauma from, violence, things like rape and so on, And he actually discovered that a lot of this trauma was stored in the fascia. And it's through either deep tissue massage that you could release this trauma. And the other effective techniques he found that could help was, interestingly, yoga and martial arts. Okay. So this is when I began to go deeper into this area. And the other interesting thing also was, in a martial arts world, we take for granted the terms like grounding, rooting, centering, right? And defending our boundaries. And I was quite surprised that in the mental health treatment area, they also use the same terms, They use the same terms as grounding, centering, and they call it defending boundaries, or maintaining boundaries, So I thought, wow, how can we, from two very different areas of work and skill, right? One is the mental health and one is martial arts. And the two concepts, these concepts are so well aligned. So that got me interested in, more of this. And I think what I discovered was, you see, in normal mental therapy, let's say, right? They approach the patient through either the cognitive side of the brain. That means you talk and reason with them. But most of the time, people in trauma or have a mental issue, you can't really, reason. The cognitive part is not fully functioning or not functioning under those conditions.
Yes.
So they have to approach them through the emotional side, talking about emotions and so on. And that's where empathy in a healer comes in, because the ability to empathize with the patient, the client, right, helps a lot. And also it helps to establish trust. And through that trust, then you're able to reach the client. Now, and so coming back to this, then for the therapist, the ability to stay calm, right, and not react to situations, the ability to be calm and to appear peaceful, sort of empathizes with the person that you're treating, So that person will also pick up on your calmness and your peacefulness, right? So that's why I think one of the first rules in therapy, from what I understand, is not to be agitated by the client, so to speak, right? So if both sides get agitated, it only escalates the situation. So one must always remain calm. And certainly the training of Yan Shou Gong and other QiGong can certainly help you to achieve that sort of mental calmness. I think that's important.
That's really excellent. And because I just completed, just after I was training with you, I went to Wicklow in Ireland to visit a colleague who's just retired after 46 years of psychotherapy. And in fact, he is accredited with being basically the creator of the psychotherapy movement here in Ireland. And he's started, guess what, to take up Neigong. Even though he's retired, he's been asking me about it. I've been showing him some other systems that I learned, but he's found it very beneficial to understand, the physical aspects. And it's that idea that if you really want to ground yourself, it can be more than a mental approach. It can be a physical grounding.
That's right. Yes.
For me, I found that a lot is that I think in my mind, I have even my wife would say to me, "Will you just ground yourself? Ground yourself, for God's sake."
Yeah. Yes.
Like, okay. And then I tried to do it, and of course, in my mind, I thought I'd done it, but physically, I wasn't grounded. And then you can bring the two together. It's a very different embodiment of that concept.
That's right.
And then, of course, rooting. I struggled with that concept, and I think that there's a bit of confusion recently over earthing, grounding, and rooting.
Rooting, yes.
And I think if you could just give us a brief idea based on what you've learned over the years.
Okay. Yeah. Grounding basically is to us I'll talk at it from the martial art point of view and then go into the other aspects later. So grounding from the martial arts point of view, grounding means to have a firm connection, a stability, right, in your stances or whatever on the ground. That means it's like you have a good example would be a three-legged stool. If the stool is designed such as the legs are splayed out, you have a wide base, then you have good grounding, you see. But grounding has a limitation because grounding, although you are stable on the ground, you're still subject to a limit on how much force you can take based on your structure. So you can say grounding could be based on your geometry in that sense, yeah? And if you have a good geometry or good biomechanics, you can say that, and then your body is able to be firm on the ground and external forces will not be able to push you over. Now, where rooting differs is that we have a deeper connection with the ground. One way of thinking about it is, that's why we say rooting. It's like a tree is having root. Imagine a tree that has a root and a tree that doesn't have a root, you see, right? There's a big difference on the sort of forces that the tree can take, right? So rooting means having a deeper connection to the ground. In a sense, you can think of it, going back to our example with the stool having legs that are actually buried into the soil or the ground, right? That's one way of looking at it. But a more sophisticated way of looking at it is that for us, we say by rooting, we actually have a energetic connection with the ground. And this goes back to, Chinese Taoist philosophy, the concept of heaven, man, and earth, right? Yes. So in rooting, we say that our qi, our human qi, has a connection with the earth qi. And by doing so, we can, then sink whatever energy is put into us into the ground, or as we talk of in martial arts, we can draw energy from the ground up to fating and so on, you see. So that is, for us, the concept of rooting. That means you have a deeper connection with the ground. It may not be physical, but it's more energetic. And of course, when it comes to the QiGong part, then there's the ability to really connect your energy to the earth, you see, so to speak.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's really very, very clear. And I think a lot of those concepts get lost sometimes when the book is authored, because I think sometimes authors have their own perception of it, through their learning style. And then they try to express it, but it's not always very clear. So I thank you for that. And also, earthing has become popular. And I noticed there's a question outside of the questions, but it's a very basic one. It's the first time I've trained with someone in a while that likes to be in bare feet when they're doing their art. I know that karate styles and stuff, but there's a lot of people in the Tai Chi world I see that are still wearing shoes. Yeah. And I'm not sure if it makes any difference other than it's nice to be able to demonstrate how the feet work and to show how the toes connect.
Yeah. I think that has been like you say, a recent upsurge in interest in earthing. And in that sense, they are talking about having your feet to be in contact with the earth, right? The actual soil or the ground itself, And I think if you look back into the Taoist philosophical aspects of it, we as humans are part of nature. And to be barefooted and stepping on the ground is to re-establish that connection with nature. Yeah. I mean, from the philosophical point of view, and you can say even from the spiritual point of view, to establish that connection. But what does it mean to go further than that, right? Yeah. And also that bears the question that does it mean that if you train barefoot on the ground, meaning, and it is better than if you are wearing shoes? Or also that I have come across the question also, people say that, can you earth when you're standing on concrete or when you're standing on, let's say, a 2-story building, and you're not directly connected to the ground?
Yeah.
So I think, then there's this whole fine scale of differentiation between what do you mean by earthing. But I think, like I said, if you talk of energy being the main point here, the qi comes from the ground, and the qi will travel through whatever structure that you have. So even though you're on a 2-story building or whatever, because the structure is made out of stone or you can say, well, cement, right, is made out of limestone, which is a natural material. The qi will pervade through the structure. So yes, I would say that you are connected to the ground in that sense, right?
Yeah.
And then having to say, coming back to this factor of whether you're wearing shoes or not, I think it does make a difference, but it's not that great a difference. And of course, there's the practical aspect of it,
Yes.
If you look at the Chinese masters, even if they train Tai Chi, they are wearing shoes because up north, the ground is cold,
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you do have to wear shoes.
Yeah, cold invasion is a real issue, isn't it? Your
whereas if you're training in the tropics, then you can, of course, go barefoot on the grass and so on, and it will be pleasant to do so. Yeah. And I think it does make a difference, but also I think it makes a difference on how your feet feels the ground. You see, I think the problem is not so much in whether it's the shoes or the ground with or without shoes, but what's more important is the type of shoes. I think a lot of shoes, now modern running shoes, for example, I've seen a lot of them with the up curved toes, right? And a very heavily padded heel.
These are my
shoes like that, tends to prevent you from feeling the ground, you see.
Yes.
Right? That means as we teach, right, we have points on the foot where we need to be aware about and how to place your weight on those different points. So that is important. So if your shoe does not allow you to develop that sort of sensation or feeling, then it's going to deter from your learning process, you see. It's either going to slow it down or you'll not be able to get it at all. So I think wearing shoes is not so much an issue, but wearing the right kind of shoe. That means preferably flat sole with as little padding as possible, and that will give you a good sensation and feel of the ground.
Yeah.
The other aspect of it I think is very important is to do with, feeling and proprioception, right? Which is how to sense your position of your body in space. And that is essential for balance, you see, right? So if you cannot feel how your feet feels the ground, then obviously it will affect your sense of balance, right? Because your nervous system depends on the feedback coming from your feet, right? The sensors in your feet to determine how to adjust the muscles and fascia to maintain your balance. So if that feeling is not there, then definitely, your sense of balance will be affected. So having the right kind of shoes would allow you to develop that skill better. And in a certain way, you can also think of grounding or rooting is that, you see, how fast you can adjust to changes in weight or in position of your feet or your body.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, is there anything else that you want to share with my humble audience, such that it is, in terms of, I know you've been very busy. You've been in Italy, Berlin. I met you in the Netherlands. You're going, I think, to Germany. I know you're based in KL in Kuala Lumpur. I would love to see you in Ireland at some point. We'll have a discussion.
I'd love to come. Yes.
We'll make that happen at some point. I know Lyndon is keen to, and Jimmy and Gary. Gary loves Ireland, he said. So we do have people here who follow you and follow you. So we have support. What's your plans now? I know you're planning to go back home to Malaysia shortly. But what's your plans going forward in the next, say, year or so with this teaching? Roughly.
Okay. I think, well, I started teaching Yan Shou Gong in Europe in 2016. That's when Lyndon invited me to come over to Amsterdam. And I remember when we first started, we had a class of only maybe about 10 people, here, only one place in Amsterdam. And then slowly it began to grow from that, So Yan Shou Gong doesn't have a big name like Tai Chi and so on. So we are starting literally from scratch. But I think I'm happy that it's grown organically to now we have, and we've got, although I haven't been, but Lyndon has taught classes in Switzerland, in Spain, right? And I think come October, we've got a booking for France. Somebody, there's going to be a class in France. So we're covering now about 5 or 6 countries.
Very
good. Over in Asia Pacific, we are now got Indonesia, Bali, and also I started a class in Melbourne the beginning of this year. So it is slowly growing. And of course, we've got classes in Malaysia. I mean, not classes, but we've got instructors in Malaysia.
Sure.
The other thing I want to make it accessible to many is because I want to have as many instructors, high quality instructors as possible throughout the world, so as to make this more accessible to many people. And I think certainly in Europe now, there shouldn't be a problem. If you look at our website, maybe we can do a plug for it also. It's called yanshougong.org, spelled as one word.
Yes.
You'll see a list of our instructors there. And if I'm not wrong, currently we're about, close to 30 instructors all over the world, with the majority of them being here in Europe.
Yes.
So I think I like to make the art more accessible.
Sure.
And my focus currently is in trying to develop more instructors. So I'm focusing on teaching at a higher level of skills so that we can develop instructors, and so that we can have better coverage and offer people a better quality of teaching and so on. And the other reason is a selfish one. That is, I don't want to be running around so much, right? I met, people like Adam, who's certainly been in the teaching circuit a longer time than I have. And he expressed to me, he's been living out of a suitcase for 11 years, Adam Misner, teaching Tai Chi.
Yes, I know.
So I said,
I don't know Adam personally, but I know of him. Yeah.
So I told myself, no, I don't think I want to be doing that for 11 years.
No.
So I'm in the process of developing more instructors. I think having come so far in, say, since 2016 till now, what is about 7 years, I think I'm quite happy with the progress. I think I'll rather grow organically, slowly but surely, rather than have an explosive growth, And my sense of how I want Yan Shou Gong to develop is to maintain the standards and the quality, because that is our trademark, right? If we lose that, then we're not differentiated from anybody else, you see. So what we have is, we are sure that we have a good product in the sense of Yan Shou Gong because of his lineage. We have good teachers for the and we also we're quite confident in our ability to produce results in students in a fairly short time. Really. And I think we want to maintain those qualities.
Yeah. Well, it's very evident already. I can see it. It's already there. And I think the quality of the instructors that will actually grow the system for you. You know, and it's very true there. We have a saying in Ireland that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And it's usually done when you see people who look similar to you and your family. But it really can be applied to this. You want to be close to the source. And we see it done globally, where there are certain external styles that become very watered down in a very fast, a very quick time. And it's a shame. I was speaking to a young client of mine last night about it, and I was quite surprised how he wasn't so enamored with mixed martial arts. He preferred the traditional arts. And I even have my son here with me, who's been learning a little bit with me. Can you say hello to Master? That's Scott. So
hello, hi.
Has benefited a lot from learning some of the position moves, because it's sensory for him. It is a good sensory tactile. Now, obviously, I'm not an instructor, so I don't know it all, but it's from other styles I can help with him connect. So people who have sensory processing issues or low level, you know, maybe even, I know Lyndon has worked with autism, things like that. I think it has a benefit, but we definitely, the quality I can see, you know, so far in Europe. Are there other countries that you've thought about and that you'd like to reach out to? Or are you just going to allow it to naturally unfold as it should?
Well, I think we'll certainly like to grow, but like I said, you know, I'd rather grow organically in a more, I would say controlled manner, you know. And because I can't, it's a good point to put it, is that I can't see myself teaching a class of, let's say, more than 40 people, you know, right? Me as one person, because I just will not be able to give the attention to each and every individual, right? And part of the purpose of having a live seminar is you can have the touch and feel, so that the students can actually experience what we are talking about, right? And I think once you have that experience, then it makes a big jump in your own learning process. Yeah, it's an eye opener, put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I experienced this when I was teaching the first time in Italy, and last year the first time in Berlin. That's why they invited us back again, you know. So yeah, and for me, it's such a satisfying and joyful experience to see the students getting it.
Yeah.
But if you have, let's say, 50 students, I don't think we can achieve this sort of quality and this sort of results, you see.
Yeah.
So as you experience in that seminar you went to, right, in Netherlands, we had 4 instructors there.
Absolutely.
For a group of about, you know, I think how many of us? About 17 people. Yeah. So I think the ratio would be about there, like, you know, 1 to about 8 or 10 would be the maximum, you see, right? Because more than that, I think it's hard to maintain quality. And I think certainly I want to deliver the sort of quality and results, because this is what we represent, right? And I want the students to get the benefit out of it, you know? Yeah. So I think, we'll be growing, but we won't be growing explosively. In fact, I'll dread it if I grow explosively.
Then it turns into chaos then, doesn't it? So look, I'm so blessed to have found you online. I'm very grateful to Lyndon for his patience. Gary for giving me lifts everywhere. To Jimmy for giving me that one-on-one time, which I think sometimes is needed. So you've a very strong crew behind you. And we have Richard here in the North Island. He reached out to me. So I have a fun question for you. Of all the countries you've been to in the last 3 or 4 months, where was the best food? And be honest.
Without a doubt, Italy. And you can't beat that, you know.
No, it's
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah,
Probably
yeah,
one of my favorite countries in Europe, I have to say.
yeah, yeah. Italy, and yeah. But if it's Asia, well, there's many to
Yes, of
choose
course.
from.
Yeah.
Because I think I happen to come from Malaysia, which is in the center of Southeast Asia, and I mean the food there is hard to compare. You
Yeah.
have Thailand next door. There's
Yes.
Malaysia. There's Singapore, which is very similar to Malaysia. We
Yeah.
also have Indonesia, you know. So yeah, great food in all those places.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to
Mhm.
going there for sure. I know my parents were there a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my wife
Oh
was.
well, if you are ever, passing through there, yeah, please drop
Yeah,
in, I'll
yeah,
be more than happy to,
yeah.
welcome you and show you around.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic. So
Mm.
I'm going to round up now with our podcast. I'm going to say a big grateful thanks for you being on the planet with us and sharing this, because not many people are prepared to go to the lengths to do it. So it's making a big difference, and it came at the right time. I think it really has come at the right time for me personally. It's helped me overcome a lot of demons just by practicing it. And if anyone has any further information, that I'll leave some links below. You can have a look at the European websites. You can have a look at the global information out there. There is also Kieran. Thanks to Kieran. I know I don't know him personally, but Kieran kind of started this for us in a way indirectly. So we have to pay a lot of thanks to him for having the courage to keep looking and searching. And yeah, what else? Is there anything else you want to say? Any passing last messages for anyone listening in before we go?
Oh, yeah. Maybe a small plug for the online course and why it's important.
Yeah.
Because we took a lot of trouble to put up the online course. It took us over, I don't know, something like 4 months, and many iterations before we came out with the format that you see on the online course. And it's not just a recording of a live, say Zoom teaching session, but actually, we broke down the steps, we explain what the details are, what is right and what is wrong way of doing things, So a lot of effort went into creating that format for the online course. And I think, many people, I think I'm not wrong, like yourself, will testify that, it is very beneficial to learn from that course, right? Rather than just following somebody who taught it, on a Zoom session.
Yeah.
So, and I think part of the reason for doing that was, like I said, was an experiment to see how much we can teach online. And I think that has been successful. But also part of that is to be able to expose YSG, Yan Shou Gong, to more people as possible, really, through the online course, which is which is better than the limiting factor that you can do with online seminars, right?
Yeah.
So with the online course, we're able to reach out to more people, and that's a good thing. And I think the other important part is for those who want to go to the next levels, let's say, the stage 1 where the outside move the inside, stage 2 is to feel the internals and so on, then once you've taken the online course, then you can go straight into the stage 2 course, which makes your progress faster, you see, because when we run the seminar, then we don't have to spend time teaching the form again, right? And that helps to make the seminars more concentrated and more beneficial to the students. And I think you yourself benefited from that way, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because we could concentrate on feeling the connections.
Right, rather than learning the movements. So I think for those who are serious, having done the online course would help a lot, because we can deep dive into the other stages. We are still continuing to run the stage 1 course where we teach people how to do the form itself.
Yeah.
But what I'm seeing is that I hope that in future we'll be doing more of the stage 2 courses so that it will give them the benefits much faster, you see? Yeah. And then later on, then once we have a sufficient number of people who've gone through the stage 2 courses, we'll be running the stage 3 courses and so on. So roughly that's how we'll be structuring the courses, going by that 5 stages, you see?
Yeah, that's fantastic. We'll leave a link actually for Kieran's the way he's put it up there, and it is very user friendly. It's step by step, and the videos aren't very long, which is good because you're not overloaded with information, and it means you can keep playing the video and pausing it. So it's
that's right.
I definitely recommend that, and especially for those who want to jump into stage 2, it's important that you have the understanding of the sequences and the positions of the feet and the hands and things like that, which is important. So it's been amazing. I am completely blown away. I'm looking forward to doing some more training. And I will make it happen somehow. We will get you here. If you're in France, you're only a short half an hour and a half on the flight to us here in Ireland. The country is emerald green so you can come and enjoy the Irish hospitality. So thank you so much.
I'd love to.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all the crew there in the Netherlands. They're looking after you, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for joining us.
Right. Thanks a lot, Anthony. Thanks for the great